Hey everyone, thanks for checking out my cover of Scars of the Crucifix by Deicide. Here I'll be going into how I covered this song. So this was my 10th cover on my channel, and I decided to celebrate this milestone by doing my first full cover, as my other covers have just consisted of me performing over the original track. I specifically chose this song because it's been a long-time favorite of mine and has been a strong influence on my own musical compositions. Scars of the Crucifix was the album that introduced me to Deicide, and the first time I heard it I was blown away, specifically by the vocals. This was the first time I really heard low gutturals and high screams mixed together to create a sort of extreme vocal harmony. Although this is a very commonly used method in metal music, Deicide were the first band I really heard use the style to phrase out like an entire chorus or lyrical section rather than just a single scream or line. I'd say Deicide have been the biggest influence on me in how I structure vocals in my own music. And it's because of how impactful this track and album was to me is why I thought this was a perfect choice for this cover. So let's get into the actual making of this cover now. Starting with my gear, I used my Indie Shredder 6 in the video as well as for all the guitar tracking. The other guitar I used just in the video was my Dean Stealth. The original track is played in E flat tuning. I did my rendition a half step lower in D standard. There was no creative reason behind this approach other than that's the main tuning I use anyway, so that makes this cover more personal to my own sound. So when it came to actually learning the song, I just grabbed the most accurate tab I could find online and switched all the instruments to D standard. For the guitar solo, I actually just wrote my own composition that sounded similar to the original, because ear learning something like this is more trouble than it's worth to me. This solo is mostly just sweeping arpeggios. I found it easy to decipher the two highest notes of each shape, so what I did is I would take those two notes and build a shape off of them that sounded in key and correct to the song. So you could say that this is my interpretation of the solo and not an actual ear-learned attempt. For my vocals, I'm using this guy right here, which is the Shure SM7B. My good friend and bandmate JD produced, mixed, and mastered this track, as well as laid down the bass. Right now we're going to switch over to him, and he's going to explain his approach to this track, as well as give us some details on his mix. Alright, so here I am with JD. JD here is the one who mixed and mastered and produced this track and laid down the bass for me. JD, why don't you go ahead and explain how you took on this track?
Yep, so the main philosophy behind this one was preserving that old school death metal vibe, bringing a little bit of modern elements into it, but I didn't actually do too much modern stuff. So first things first, the drums, the kick, and the snare are very, very high in attack and very, very quick decays on them. They are not quite grindy, but really, really close to being grindy. Next, I suppose we get to guitars. Now, Deicide uses Marshalls and they use Proco Rats, or especially back in those days. So that is the main guitar tracks that you're hearing are through Marshalls and Proco Rat simulations.
So you focus mostly on what their older stuff used for this actual album, or did you take into account some of the stuff they use nowadays?
Mostly the classic gear from. It was actually the best point of reference I could find was live rigs from the 90s. So right. that was my base of reference. EQ'd it the way I would EQ something more modern, but those are the classic, quite a bit scooped sounding guitars. Yeah. I did get you to quad track everything. So the main two guitars are quite high in the mix. Those are your Marshalls. And then a little bit lower, you'll actually hear a Mesa and a 5150 in the mix as well. Right. The solo, I wanted a little bit more of a creamy sound. I got rid of the Rat and I put in Klon simulation, but that's as simple as it gets, truly. Go on to the bass. Back in those days, the standard was two bass tracks, like a more clean and a more dirty. So yeah. Your clean is an amp sound. I used a Gallion Kruger, and then the dirty is a classic Sans amp. It's as simple as it gets.
Yeah.
The only time where I got a little bit more modern, I guess, would have been on the vocals, and I did the. I guess modern is not really the right term because people have been doing it for like 15 years now. Of the center vocal track with left and right unison takes on there as well that I got you to do. So that is how all the vocals that you're hearing are processed. during the verses, you've got one vocal track, and during the choruses, you've got two. They're all unison and then left and rights. And I also threw just a little bit of processing on there. I threw a little bit of an octave down to make you sound more like a monster during certain parts. So simple as that. Compress the hell out of a couple things and call it a day.
And as I mentioned, you laid on the bass. Do you want to share what bass you used to record this song?
Yeah, no problem. So again, looking at the live rig from that I could find from back then, all BC Rich guitars and LTD basses. So I have an LTD 5-string here that I used for the bass, with a hard pick to get a lot of attack was all I needed. Was quite the arm workout. Took a few tries to be able to get it to where I wanted it to be, because that is a tiring chugging song. That was all we needed to use.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, thanks a lot. So that was JD giving us some info on his work on this song. I'd like to take this moment to thank him for his incredible work and contribution to this cover. If you have any further questions about his mix, be sure to leave them in the comments below, and I'll get an answer for you guys. I'd also like to mention that we are in a band together called Ominous Eclipse, and I will leave a link to that in the description below for anyone interested in checking that out. We actually had the pleasure of opening for Deicide a few years ago, and you can actually see the show poster for that show in the background of the vocal shots. So that's it for this video. Thanks for checking it out and staying till the end. Please be sure to hit like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments below if you want to see more full covers like this one. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.